Ever wake up at 3 a.m. with your heart racing, suddenly hit by the thought that one day you just won't exist anymore? That creeping panic that makes your chest tight? You're not alone.
Here's what's weird. Some people barely think about death at all.
They go through life without that existential dread.
So what's the difference? Why are some of us terrified of dying while others seem totally fine with it?
The answer isn't what you think. It's not about being brave or weak. It's about how your brain is wired, what you experienced growing up, and whether you've found something that makes life feel meaningful.
Let's break down the psychology behind death anxiety and why it hits some of us way harder than others.
First, let's talk about what death anxiety actually is. Psychologists call it thanatophobia when it's severe, but most of us just experience it as this underlying fear that pops up randomly. It's not just about being afraid of the pain of dying. It's about the complete loss of consciousness, the end of everything you know, leaving people behind, or the fear that your life won't have mattered. Here's the thing. This fear is uniquely human. As far as we know, we're the only species that truly understands we're going to die someday. That knowledge shapes literally everything about how we live. So why do some people get crippled by this fear while others don't? Let's start with your child. Research shows that people who grew up in unstable or traumatic environments tend to have higher death anxiety as adults. If you experienced loss early, if a parent was seriously ill, or if you grew up around a lot of talk about death and religion in a fearful way, your brain learned to see death as this looming threat. One study published in the journal Death Studies found that people who lost a parent before age 17 reported significantly higher death anxiety throughout their lives. Your early experiences literally program how you think about mortality. Then there's your attachment style. The same attachment theory that affects your relationships also affects how you deal with death. People with anxious attachment, who worry about being abandoned or unloved, tend to have much higher death anxiety. Why? Because death is the ultimate abandonment. You're leaving everyone, and everyone will eventually leave you. People with secure attachment styles, who feel confident in their connections and sense of self, handle death anxiety way better. They've got this internal stability that doesn't crumble when facing mortality. Now here's where it gets really interesting. Religion and belief systems. You'd think religious people would be less afraid of death because they believe in an afterlife, right? Well, it's complicated. Research shows that people with strong, genuine religious faith do tend to have lower death anxiety. But here's the catch. People who are uncertain about their beliefs, or who follow religion out of fear rather than genuine faith, actually have higher death anxiety than atheists. A study in the Journal of Religion and Health found that it's not belief in God that reduces death anxiety. It's having a sense of meaning and purpose. Atheists who find meaning through relationships, work, or personal values can be just as calm about death as devout believers. Let's talk about control. People who feel like they have control over their lives tend to be less anxious about death. When you feel powerless in life, death becomes this huge, terrifying unknown. When you feel like you're living intentionally, making choices, creating the life you want, death becomes less scary. It's still sad. Still something you rather avoid. But it's not this monster lurking in your mind. Error management theory, developed by psychologists in the 1980s, shows that people cope with death anxiety by building self-esteem and believing in something bigger than themselves. When you feel like your life has value and meaning, death loses some of its power. Age plays a weird role too. You'd think older people would be more afraid of death because it's closer, right? Actually, the opposite is often true. Multiple studies show that death anxiety peaks in your 20s and declines as you get older. By the time people hit their 60s and 70s, most report being way less afraid of death than they were as young adults. Why? Because they've lived. They've accumulated experiences, relationships, and a sense that their life has had meaning. They've also probably lost people close to them and seen that death is a natural part of life. When you're young, death feels like it's stealing your future. When you're older, it feels more like a natural ending. Personality matters too. People high in neuroticism who tend to worry about everything obviously worry more about death. There's another trait that matters even more: openness to experience. People who are curious, who embrace new ideas and aren't rigid in their thinking, tend to have lower death anxiety. They see death as part of the human experience, something to think about and accept rather than avoid. Meanwhile, people who need certainty and control struggle more with the ultimate uncertainty of death. Here's something that might surprise you. Confronting death can actually reduce your fear of it. Therapists use something called existential therapy to help people face mortality head-on. When you stop avoiding thoughts about death and actually sit with them, process them, think through what they mean, the anxiety often decreases. It's like exposure therapy for any phobia. The more you face it, the less power it has. People who work in hospice care or who've had near-death experiences often report feeling more at peace with mortality afterward, not more afraid. And here's the practical part. If you struggle with death anxiety, there are things that actually help. Building strong relationships reduces death anxiety because you feel connected to something that continues beyond you. Finding purpose, whether through work, creativity, helping others, or raising kids, gives you a sense that your life matters. Taking care of your physical health can reduce health-related death anxiety. And paradoxically, accepting that death is inevitable and outside your control can bring peace. It's the fighting against it, the constant worry, that makes it worse. The people who seem calm about death aren't fearless. They've just found ways to make peace with it. They've built lives that feel meaningful. They've accepted that some things are beyond their control. They focus on living well instead of obsessing over the end. And maybe that's the real answer. Death anxiety isn't really about death. It's about whether you feel like your life right now matters. So here's my question for you. What gives your life meaning? What makes you feel like you're not just existing, but actually living? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And if this video helped you think about mortality in a new way, hit that subscribe button. We're exploring the deep psychological questions that keep us all up at night.